Hello. The text I have chosen to work with today is The Picture of Dorian Gray by Oscar Wilde, which is an excerpt from the novel by the same name. The story was written in the Victorian age, 1890. The novel takes place in Dorian Gray's house, mainly in the attic, in London in the Victorian age. Even though the text takes place in London, it's definitely based on the fiction genre. Um, in this excerpt, it only takes place in his house. We can see that the story takes place around 2 a.m. when Dorian asks his house servant, down here, we can see that he asks him, but I had forgotten my latchkey. What time is it? 10 minutes past 2, sir, answered the man, looking at the clock and blinking. Um, this is approximately right after he killed Basil. We don't hear about the time of year, or which year it's in, but we hear the time. As the reader, you can also see that Dorian probably isn't poor because of the fact that he has a very big house and this servant. And this the description of the text is very direct and is described with a lot of details. The story is told from a third-person narrator point of view. We are a fly on the wall, and we're just spectating what's going on in this attic. There are several characters in this text. We meet Dorian, we meet Basil, Dorian's servant, and then we hear about a policeman outside on the pavement. That we hear here. He says. He says here, he looked down and saw the policeman going his rounds and flashing the long beam of his lantern on the doors of the silent house. Otherwise, there's not a lot of other persons we learn about, but yeah. We don't hear that much about Dorian, other than he is very beautiful, and he seems a bit frustrated later on in the story. But then there is this painting, and this painting has a lot of symbolic meaning. And Basil is the one that has painted this picture a while ago. The picture is a symbol of Dorian's soul, and the picture is also aging while Dorian stays beautiful. Basil comes by to visit, and Dorian wants to show him the picture that both of them haven't seen in a long time. Dorian is the main character in this story. He does some very bad stuff, but he still remains calm while he does it. And I think Basil and Dorian are big contrasts from each other, and they are both going through a development through the story and through the act where Dorian ends up killing Basil. And we hear in the start, the story starts with in medias res, when we follow Basil and Dorian walk upstairs towards the painting in Dorian's home. We can see here he passed out of the room and began the ascent, Basil Hallward following close behind. This journey to the top of the house is a journey towards Dorian's real image. Dorian has painted this portrait with his life and his experiences, but still the painter is Basil. The story ends with a sort of cliffhanger. It's only a chapter of the novel, so it makes sense that that they want to build up some excitement to the next chapter. Uh, it's unknown what will happen to Dorian. Uh, it's unknown what will happen, um, and whether or not anyone will solve the mystery of what happened to Basil Hallwood. That's also unknown. Uh, if we should talk about the composition, the events are presented in chronological order, and the narrator tells us exactly what happens and what the main persons think about it. There are no flashbacks, but they are referring to the painting and when it was first painted and what happened at that time. So here, they're referring to the events that happened with this painting in the first place, and we hear what happened here. One day you introduced me to a friend of yours who explained to me the wonder of youth, and you finished a portrait of me that revealed to me the wonder of beauty. In a mad moment that even now I don't know whether I regret or not, I made a wish, perhaps you would call it a prayer. Basil answers here, I remember it, oh how well I remember it. No, the thing is impossible. He says that he does remember, but he doesn't really want to remember, we can see here. Later on, Basil starts to insult this painting, and when he does that, he also insults Dorian's soul. And he says here that it has the eyes of the devil, and we can see that Dorian is really crying with a wild gesture of despair. This is maybe a kind of hint, as we can see that the reader, his hatred is boiling. This could also be a hint of what's going to happen when we see here. And this is what you have done with your life. Why? You must be worse even than those who talk against your fancy to be. You fancy you to be. He keeps on insulting Dorian and this picture, and we can see as a reader that that there's gonna happen something. Something is going to happen. At first, Basil adored and worshipped Dorian, and this all turns into a conflict. Afterwards, it's very calm, and then the chapter ends. So I would say that this story is in the category of the pyramid plot structure, which is very basic. It's starts to not really building up, but it starts very calm, and then there comes a climax, and then goes down again, very calm. The genre is, this is a novel, and the story has a kind of gothic feeling to it. It's a little bit dark, a little bit mysterious, and almost everything in the story has these elements. It's a little bit spooky and yeah, just a little bit mysterious. And yeah, this is the Victorian age, and it's good.